Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the final show of the week here on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. My name is Christopher Shepard, your host here today. Thank you all for tuning in. Happy Friday to you all. And on this Friday afternoon, we got to get into the nitty-gritty before the weekend of fantasy football commences. Gonna go over my favorite starts and sits for the week. As you know, this is a list that I've compiled in terms of starts from my rankings throughout the week that I'm glad to present to you guys. And then, of course, we have to talk about some players that you might want to avoid for this week as well. And then we talk about big games with huge fantasy implications for you, not just in the NFL, but in college football as well, because week 13 in the college football season is going to get a little hectic. And then we conclude today's show by looking yet again to Sunday Night Football, a very interesting NFC matchup, and giving you some fantasy advice for that one in terms of starting and sitting certain players. But before we get into any of that fun stuff, I do want to remind you that if you wish to view more content such as this across many different shows throughout our networks here at GSMC, consider liking, following, and subscribing to the shows and the networks here. A lot of people doing a lot of great things for the network. It is greatly appreciated in return what you do for us. But if you do want to interact with the show a little bit more directly while we are live streaming our shows, consider making yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube. You can do a lot of things to contribute and interact with the show. If you're not a big fan of YouTube, you can go to our website, gsmcspodcast.net, where you can leave a little tip or donation, or you can do the same by clicking the $ in the chat box in the comments section here on YouTube and leave a tip or donation there as well. Or if you just want to leave any burning questions, comments, or concerns throughout the show's duration, I'll be glad to read them on air. I love hearing your guys' opinions, and it just makes the show that much better, and I truly appreciate and thank all my supporters out there during this show. Without further ado, let us jump right into our first segment of the day here, my favorite starts of the week. Now, as you all know, throughout the week, I go over my rankings at each position for certain players who I feel could be viable starts for this week. And this list is a compilation of certain players at each position that I believe could be my favorite start of the week and that I think you should be penciling into your fantasy roster as a last-minute decision if you are still searching. But as always, you don't have to take my word as gospel. These are just suggestions, and some of you might be a little bit skeptical about them. That's why I'm putting them out there as my own thoughts, and you are more than welcome to leave your own thoughts throughout this segment as well, if you agree or disagree. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Starting off with the QB that I know will raise some eyebrows, but I truly think, in terms of this game, in terms of this division, in terms of this rivalry, I feel like the stakes are going to be raised for this guy, and he's going to come through for his team. And I'm making myself very clear here. This is not an unbiased opinion. I just feel this is how the game is going to flow and what this guy is going to need to do. And of course, I'm going to be talking about Geno Smith against the Cardinals at the QB position as perhaps my favorite start of the week. And here is why. I feel like in this game, when you think about where both teams are coming from, the Cardinals fresh off a bye week, the Seahawks probably going through one of their tougher weeks in terms of off time and downtime that they've ever had this season. Powers out at their facilities, cold showers for all the players, and they just got back from playing a very tough physical game against another divisional opponent in San Francisco. So they might come into this one a little bit more bruised and battered than the Cardinals, who might look more fresh. But then again, when I think about the nature of this game, it's a divisional game, it's at Lumen Field, the crowd's going to be crazy, and I just feel like this kind of game calls for that shootout mentality. And I feel like, Kyler Murray could be the guy to make this game be a shootout just because of his electricity as a quarterback and the plays he can make. But I don't necessarily think the Cardinals have faced a QB that can be as efficient within his offense as Geno Smith. And what I really liked about that San Fran game is that a lot of small details that weren't clicking for Seattle over those past couple of weeks where they went on that losing streak started to click. The O-line's getting healthier. The defense finally has a vocal leader in linebacker Ernest Jones, who they just acquired over the deadline. This team is looking very threatening. But when I look at its leader, Geno Smith, I look at a guy who, when he's on, can be one of the more effective QBs in this league. And against the Cardinals defense that I feel like is a little bit overconfident coming into this one. And really trying to maintain their swagger that they've developed over these past couple of weeks. I think Geno can go in there and really show out with this offense that they have. If the O-line clicks and he's protected, look for him to make the right decisions. Look for him to try to go deep as well. There's a lot of versatility to his game, so that is why I'm picking Geno Smith as my QB to look out for this week. Now for my running back. How about Joe Mixon after another great game as a Houston Texan last week against the Cowboys, perhaps the best player in that offense during that game, and perhaps their best player, period, when it comes to the offensive side of the football this season. And going up against a physical Titans defense, as you know, has kind of lost a lot of its luster ever since L'Jarius Sneed went down, and their big guys up front, Harold Landry and Jeffrey Simmons, haven't been able to get us home as much, and they've allowed a lot more points over these past couple of weeks. I still think that Joe Mixon needs to be the guy for the Houston Texans, because when I look at this team, I see a team that, even with Nico Collins back in the fold, I feel like CJ Stroud is just playing a little bit too much within himself, and he needs Joe Mixon to kind of relax and compose himself a little bit. And so look at this game as potentially a trap game for Houston, but also an opportunity for a guy like Joe Mixon to prove his worth in this offense, because he truly is, in my opinion, their most valuable offensive weapon, just because of what he can open up and what he can do himself within this offense. So if the pass game gets ugly early for Houston, look for Joe Mixon to get a lot more touches and potentially targets in the receiving game as well in this one early, because I think that this could be a trap game, like I said, but it's all going to come down to Joe Mixon's play and his physicality for this offense that can really get them going here in what could potentially be a pratfall game for them. Then the wide receiver position, I'm going with Tyreek Hill. It's a little bit of a risky pick going up against as good of a corner as Christian Gonzalez, but this time he has Tua throwing him the ball and not Skylar Thompson. So that's 1+ for him, and I feel like this is one of those games where the Dolphins are just going to come in with mentality to get every single piece of that offense going, whether it be the run game, whether it be through the air. I just feel like everything's going to click, much like how it did with the Rams last week. Remember when they were coming off a loss to this very Dolphins team, and they took a while to get going, but once they started opening up every avenue of their offense, they really looked like a complete unit. And that's what I think the Dolphins are going to do this time around against the Patriots this week. I feel like with Tua, they're a much more complete, more versatile football team, and it's going to translate to the field against this Patriots team that, yes, while it's playing physical, while it's playing tough, is still a work in progress. And I know that this matchup is still going to be tough no matter who's at the QE position for Tyreek Hill going up against a high caliber corner like Gonzalez, but I still think that this is the moment for the Dolphins to really kick into gear. If they really want to make this playoff push, this is the game where they're going to do it. And Tyreek Hill is going to be a huge factor in this one for them as well. So look for him to be a player you should pencil in for your fantasy roster this week. And then the tight end position, I just love this one because it's been a long time coming for this guy, and I feel like this is the perfect game for him to get right yet again for Minnesota. TJ Hawkinson hasn't really looked like himself that much ever since his return from an almost year-long recovery from that scary ACL injury last year. But I feel like this is a perfect moment in a divisional game with potentially not as much at stake for Minnesota, but still kind of a game of pride, per se, in the NFC North, wanting to beat the Bears. And I feel like this is also a perfect opportunity because of the fact that the Bears secondary is just as physical as this Viking skill position group, but TJ Hawkinson can be the skeleton key for it. He can be the guy to unlock certain things for this Minnesota offense. And I feel like it's going to be a very physical, gritty game that I feel like TJ Hawkinson can be the reason that Minnesota pulls this one out. So look for TJ Hawkinson to exploit whatever coverage the Bears throw at him and really open up some different looks for Minnesota, especially on the perimeter, where they want guys like Addison and Jefferson to win. So look for TJ Hawkinson to really be a focal point in this one. And then last but not least, the defense. Gotta go with the Bucs here. The Giants have just had a very crazy week. Just released Daniel Jones, of all things, and they're rocking with Tommy DeVito in this one. The Bucs, though, fresh off a bye, and they're not going to be overawed by any situation. They have one of the easiest schedules to close out the year, and they're very much still in the thick of the NFC South race. And so they're going to prove that this is a team primed and ready to go for the second half of the season to vault them back into at least NFC South contendency. But I feel like, with this schedule, this is the perfect get-right game for a defense that, we've been waiting to see really dominate certain games, but hasn't necessarily put all the pieces together. A lot of injuries have occurred with this defensive roster, but I still think it's one of, when fully healthy, the most fearsome defenses in the entire National Football League, and they're going to prove it in Tommy DeVito's first game back as a New York Giant. It's going to be a rough one for him. So all these starts, I think the Bucs can be the best one. But let me review them all. At QB, a risky one in Geno Smith. Running back, Joe Mixon. Wide receiver, Tyreek Hill. Tight end, TJ Hawkinson. And the defense of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But let me know what you think in the comments, because coming up next, we're going to have to look at some uglier options for this week. The sits, the guys you might want to avoid. We're going to be right back after this short break with that segment.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.